every second and fourth Thursday of the month at noon Mountain, we will be here with a new presentation. During this presentation, you may come up with questions. If you do, please use the Q&A button on your screen to send in your questions, as all of you are muted. Your question will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Now, I would like to introduce you to today's presenter, Russ Bega. Russ began collecting U.S. coins when he was 8 years old after a trip to his local coin shop in northern Colorado. He was previously employed by Heritage Auction Galleries before departing on a decade-long career as a U.S. Army Infantry non-commissioned officer. In 2021, he joined the Harlan J. Berk team in Chicago. His specialty is Liberty-seated coins and 19th century numismatics. Russ will be presenting The Art of American Coinage, reflecting values from 1792 to today, and it is yours, Russ.
Thank you so much, Paula. Sorry about that. Let's see if we can get the screen shared and start the right way. All right. I want to thank everybody for showing up today and give a little bit of context to this talk as well. So this talk was actually originally done as a Sundman lecture at the World's Fair of Money last year. It was a big hit, and I had a lot of fun with it, so I've tweaked it a bit, and I've done a lot more with this topic, and I'm going to keep doing more with this topic. Excuse the frog in my throat. I've been talking all day on the counter, a little raw, but that's all right. We're going to get through it. Before we really get going, I always like to give a little bit of context about myself. I am currently the COO of Harlan J. Berk Limited in Chicago. I'm a 13-year Army vet. I'm a writer, researcher, and presenter. I have my Bachelor's of Applied Arts and Sciences from Midwestern State University, which is a small school in Texas. Got that in 2023. And I actually just finished my MBA at Purdue in December. So that is essentially me in a nutshell. Now, a quick note on this particular topic and talk. Context is a thing that I occasionally go a little long in. So there's a lot of context here. So I don't really apologize for that, but be prepared for it. Also, with this, this is not quite an overarching view of all US coins. You might not see your favorite US coin, or even a US coin that you consider really, really important or really emblematic of liberty. A lot of these are my personal choices to really try to convey the point of values on coinage. So if you don't see your favorite coin, it's not because I didn't care. It's probably just because more of it didn't quite fit in the purview of this talk. So, without further ado, ancient values. Oh, sorry, guys. Hang on. Sorry, this is a little messed up. I gotta fix this. This is not cooperating with me. All right, there's an old Yakov Smirnoff joke, and it goes something like this. In America, you put in God we trust on your money. In the Soviet Union, we have no money. While I always enjoy a really good joke at the Soviet Union's expense, there is a much deeper truth hidden in that punchline. From the very beginning of coinage, over 2,500 years ago in a small Greek kingdom, civilizations have used money not just to be a medium of exchange, but as a canvas to express their ideals. These values, which might seem foreign or even strange to us today, were incredibly powerful symbols in their own time, reflections of a people's gods, their rulers, and their identity. Now, these ancient values, and one of the best examples I can give is the iconic Athenian owl. On one side of these coins, you'll find Athena, the goddess of wisdom, warfare, strategy, and crafts. She was also the patron deity of Athens, the city that bears her name, and enjoyed her protection. Athena was revered for her intellect and her role as a guide to heroes. On the reverse of this coin, the Athenians placed her sacred animal, the owl, an enduring symbol of wisdom, knowledge, and vision beyond the surface. And right beside it, three very important letters: Alpha, Theta, Epsilon. A bold abbreviation meaning of the Athenians. And that inscription is no small thing. It is a very proud and very declarative statement. This coin is of the Athenians. It belonged to them. It spoke to their identity, their pride, and their place in the world. These coins circulated for hundreds of years, some even long after the power of Athens had faded into memory. Crude imitations continued to be made for centuries, hoping to ride the coattails of Athens' once mighty legacy. In our own American experiment, we've carried on this tradition. From the first coin struck by our founding fathers to the most recent issues from the U.S. Mint, we've embedded our values, hopes, ideals, and even our national anxieties onto our coinage. So today, I'd like to take you on a journey. Together, let's explore how American ideals have evolved and how we've expressed them, not in speeches or textbooks, but in the very coins we carry in our pockets. So, I told you about that whole context thing. So, before we dive headlong into American coinage, it's important that we take a step back and really look at some of that context. And we really set the stage for the time period our founding fathers found themselves in. The Enlightenment, spanning the late 17th through 18th centuries, was a profound intellectual and cultural movement that reshaped Western society. Known also as the Age of Reason, the Enlightenment emphasized logic, empirical evidence, and individual liberty over superstition, monarchy, and institutional dogma. Thinkers like Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, and Kant questioned long-standing power structures and advocated for ideals such as reason, tolerance, and constitutional government. These evolving ideas laid the founding for revolutions in America and France, influenced the creation of democratic systems, and deeply altered the relationship between citizens and state. But the Enlightenment wasn't just about philosophy and politics. It also influenced culture, art, and everyday life, even including fashion. As society moved away from aristocratic opulence and feudal tradition, fashion even became more restrained and practical, reflecting new Enlightenment values of modesty, rationality, and individual expression. In France, men began shifting from elaborate silk garments and powdered wigs to more understated tailor suits that reflected a sense of civic virtue and intellectual seriousness. Women's fashion, while still ornate, increasingly favored lighter fabrics and designs that allowed greater mobility, signaling a move toward more naturalistic ideals and personal freedom. At the heart of the Enlightenment was a shift in how people understood their place in the world. Religion, while still significant, was no longer accepted uncritically. Instead, deism gained popularity, a belief in a rational creator who does not interfere with the workings of the universe. Education became a tool for empowerment, and literacy rates rose, giving more people access to new ideas. Scientific discovery, including Newtonian physics and medical advances, flourished alongside philosophical inquiry, strengthening faith in human progress. The Enlightenment's the Enlightenment's evolving values emphasized dignity, equality, and reason as central to human existence. These values were expressed in literature, salons, public discourse, and the visual arts. Satire became a powerful tool for critiquing the church and monarchy. Public debate was encouraged throughout pamphlets, newspapers, and coffeehouse gatherings. Overall, the Enlightenment was not just a philosophical awakening. It was a cultural transformation that shaped how people lived, dressed, thought, and related to one another, with effects still visible in modern democratic societies today. And importantly, for our discussion, this is the world that our founding fathers found themselves in when they were designing our first actual coinage. Now, first, we have to talk about the Fugio cent. In the spring of 1787, the young nation channels this same Enlightenment spirit into something tangible. Its first quote-unquote true coin. Designed in the shadow of revolution, this coin reflects the radical ideals and fresh identity of a country still discovering who it is. The Fugio cent reflects Benjamin Franklin's Enlightenment philosophy through both symbolic and literal design elements. The reverse features 13 interlocking rings representing the original colonies and Franklin's personal commitment to moral development, underscored by his belief in 13 key virtues. He advocated dedicating a week to practicing each such virtue, like temperance, frugality, and humility, cycling through them 4 times per year to build character through discipline. Even Franklin's endorsement of the Gregorian calendar on the front all reinforce his emphasis on order, structure, and integrity. The obverse features a sundial with the Latin word fugio, I fly, a nod to the fleeting nature of time and a reminder of the value Franklin placed on using time wisely. Also, mind your business is a wonderful thing that everybody likes to quote, but it's not mind your own business, it's mind your business. It is literally mind your business, mind your fiduciary responsibility, mind your finances. So this is very much part of Franklin trying to put his own ideals and his own Enlightenment ideals on coinage. So with that, we have to talk about some other context, and we have to talk about a national personification. With the birth of the new American nation as we know it, following the ratification of the current U.S. Constitution in 1791, a new theme appeared. A national personification is a symbolic figure used to represent a nation's identity, values, and ideals in human form. Often depicted as a woman, such figures serve as allegorical representations of abstract concepts like liberty, justice, and patriotism. They appear in art, literature, political cartoons, and coinage to foster unity and express national character. Examples include Britannia for Britain and Marianne for France, and there are many, many others. These figures often draw from classical imagery and mythological motifs, reflecting Enlightenment influences and providing a relatable emotional image through which people connect with their country's ideals. The newly independent United States reached back to a 16th century ideal, that of Columbia. The name Columbia is derived from Christopher Columbus. It first appears in 16th century poetry and political discourse as a feminine embodiment of America. She's imagined in the classical style, often portrayed as a graceful robed woman, sometimes with a liberty cap or staff, drawing on Greco-Roman imagery popular during the Enlightenment. Columbia served as a poetic and visual stand-in for the United States in literature, songs, and art, especially during the American Revolutionary War. She represented liberty, resistance to tyranny, and the hope of a Republican future. Writers and artists used Columbia to rally support for independence and to express the virtues of the emerging American character. This national personification would soon morph into a distinctly American tradition, putting a personification not necessarily of Columbia, but an outgrowth of her. That personification is the goddess of liberty herself. So now that we have a little bit more context through, let's get a little more context. This period in our nation's coinage history is both dizzying and expansive. To that end, I won't attempt to walk through every single design, variation, and sub-design produced by the early US Mint. Doing so would take far more time than we have. Instead, we'll focus on key themes that reflect the values, mores, and norms of the new American Republic. A natural place to begin is with the Coinage Act of 1792, which authorized the striking of the first official coins under the authority of the new Congress. This foundational legislation established the United States Mint and created our first formal monetary system. It defined the dollar based on a fixed weight in silver, set standards for gold and copper coinage, and outlined denominations. Crucially for our discussion today, the act included specific language about coin design. Quote, "Upon one side of each of the said coins there shall be an impression emblematic of liberty, with an inscription of the word liberty and the year of the coinage, and upon the reverse of each of the gold and silver coins there shall be the figure or representation of an eagle with the inscription United States of America." So, even in our earliest laws, we see how symbolism is woven into our coinage to reflect the ideals of liberty, nationhood, and identity. However, these are hardly what one could call instructions for a design. An impression emblematic of liberty could have meant many things at this time. Things like a liberty cap, a liberty pole, or even a liberty tree were all common symbols used during and immediately after the Revolution. Yet, while these themes would crop up later on coins, the personification of liberty, the goddess of liberty, was the choice for the first federal coinage design, and this theme would essentially remain unchanged until the 20th century. Excuse me, guys, that frog in my throat just doesn't want to go away. So, we're going to start our story with the first regular production coinage by the Mint in Philadelphia. I hear some of you saying, what about the half dime? Mint in Philadelphia. So the 1793 chain cent is a coin with a story and a half. The early Philadelphia Mint has a story that could fit several presentations in it, so I'm going to keep the background as brief as possible. You've all seen how well that goes. There were many hurdles to starting production of coinage for the new nation, including a $10,000 surety bond requirement specifically. The chief coiner and assayer were each required to post these bonds before handling precious metal, delaying the production of silver coins until 1794 and gold issues until 1795. Among the challenges was the lack of a true die sinker. Henry Voigt was hastily selected to cut the dies for the new cent, and he would face major backlash in the press for his efforts. Her unbound hair was meant to symbolize freedom. Instead, what its disheveled look then suggested was failure of respectability, either savagery or more often madness. This explains such criticisms as appeared in the Philadelphia Mail on March the 18th of 1793. Quote, "The American cents do not answer our expectations. Liberty herself appears to be in a fright. May she not justly cry out in the words of the apostle, Alexander the coppersmith hath done much evil. The Lord will reward him according to his works." That's a really damning report for a guy that's trying his very best. Even with a few years of hindsight, the design was still much maligned. Charlie Pollock's comment in a letter to General Williams of January 25th, 1796 says, quote, "A plow and a sheaf of wheat would be better than an idiot's head with flowing hair, which was meant to denote liberty, but which the world will suppose was intended to designate the head of an Indian squaw. The first attempt at portraying our shared values on coinage had all the basic ingredients, including an image of liberty and national unity, but clearly something was missing." So now we're going to jump ahead a little bit into the future, 1794 to 1836. This is the era of what I like to call classic liberty. Once the Philadelphia Mint was truly up and running and once the Philadelphia Mint was able to truly get up and running and employ true specialists and modern techniques, designs improved dramatically. We now have to discuss some of the adornments that will begin cropping up at this time that liberty is frequently pictured with. The first being the Liberty Cap. While many will tell you this is a Phrygian cap, that is actually a misnomer. The Liberty Cap tradition traces its roots to Rome and the unique slavery system they practiced. Rather than chattel-based slavery, that is, slavery based on purely race, and complete bondage throughout life, the Roman system could see near anyone become a slave, and many free citizens ended up in bondage in some fashion. One of my favorite examples is gladiators were occasionally citizens that sold themselves to the ludus, which is the gladiatorial combat school, to pay a debt. In this system, manumission was much more common, and many slaves would even buy their own freedom. Many very highly educated Greek slaves at this time were brought to Rome, and they would run whole households and businesses. And a lot of times they would be paid a small salary, and they could save their money and actually free themselves and their families. So when a slave was freed, they were presented with a pilus, a soft, flexible cap that showed they were free men. You'll notice on 3 of our 4 examples of the age of classic liberty that she is indeed wearing or near a pilus. Another adornment we must discuss is the Liberty Pole. The Liberty Pole is a historic symbol of resistance and self-governance, originating during the American colonial period as a protest against British tyranny. Typically a tall wooden pole, it was often topped with a liberty cap or banner and erected in town squares as a rallying point for patriots. First popularized during the Stamp Act protests of the 1760s, liberty poles became enduring emblems of civil liberty and popular sovereignty. They were especially significant to the Sons of Liberty who used them to mobilize public sentiment. Today, they remain a powerful reminder of grassroots activism and the fight for democratic rights. Interestingly, we should point out that this is yet another Roman symbol. When the Liberators, this is the group of assassins that assassinated Julius Caesar in 44 BC, these conspirators allegedly paraded around Rome with their bloody weapons and a pilus atop a spear. We also should note that the reverse of each coin, save the copper issues, features prominently the bald eagle. a symbol that was already gaining enormous popularity at the time based on the Great Seal of the United States. The eagle on the seal of the United States holds deep symbolic meaning, particularly in its posture and what it clutches. In its right talon, the position of honor, it holds an olive branch, symbolizing peace. In its left talon, it clutches a bundle of arrows, representing readiness for war. Importantly, excuse me, lost my place. Uh, Sorry, guys. Importantly, the eagle faces the olive branch, signifying the nation's preference for peace over conflict. However, by still holding the arrows, it conveys a message of strength and vigilance. This balanced symbolism reflects the founding ideals of the United States, a commitment to diplomacy backed by the resolve to defend its values. We see this commitment to peace is shown on coinage starting quite early. This theme will continue on later issues. So 1836 to 1866. I chose to use 1836 as the dividing line between eras of U.S. coinage for a couple of reasons. The first of which is the introduction of the steam press to our young nation. Prior to 1836, all coinage was struck on a screw press. Screw presses this is a very labor-intensive process that could not deliver the same kind of results that a steam press could. This new technology allowed for greater detail on designs and better quality striking fitting of beautiful designs. This is also a dividing line in terms of history and politics. The hard times of the 1830s referred to a period of economic distress triggered by the Panic of 1837. Following years of speculative growth and unstable banking policies, President Andrew Jackson's dismantling of the Second Bank of the United States and issuance of the Specie Circular, which required land payments in gold or silver, disrupted credit and sparked a financial collapse. Banks failed, businesses closed, and unemployment soared. The crisis deeply affected working-class Americans and small merchants, fueling widespread discontent. This era is famously remembered through quote-unquote hard times tokens, unofficial coinage used during the currency shortage reflecting public frustration and political protest. Not only are there hard times in the United States, but the generation that fought, bled, and died in the American Revolution were now relics of the past, and new symbols for a new generation were in order. In 1836, a design would be put forth that would grace our nation's coinage in some form or another for a whopping 55 years. This is, of course, Christian Gobrecht's lauded liberty-seated design. This design would feature on denominations from half dime to dollar, and for several generations be the ubiquitous coin design of their time. The design itself is elegant and simple. Liberty is seated on a rock, her head facing left. She clutches in her arm a liberty cap and liberty pole, and with her right hand holds a shield, bearing the heraldry of the American flag and a scroll proclaiming liberty. This design has a lot going on. We've mentioned the liberty cap and liberty pole, but now we add a new element, one we haven't really seen alone as a standalone yet. And this is, of course, the shield. This is the first example of martial prowess really to appear on the obverse of a U.S. coin. And this is not an accident, but it's a deliberate proclamation to the world. While our revolutionary forefathers were concerned about building a new nation, their sons and grandsons were worried about keeping that nation. The War of 1812, which could have, and probably should have, ended disastrously, I feel is a good example to point out the changing values of the time, along with expansionist and proto-manifest destiny sentiment. The Monroe Doctrine, articulated in 1823 by President James Monroe, was a defining moment in American foreign policy. It declared that the Western Hemisphere was no longer open to European colonization, and that any interference by European powers in the Americas would be viewed as a threat to U.S. interests. While the doctrine lacked immediate enforcement power, it asserted a bold vision of American influence over the region. Over time, it evolved into a cornerstone of U.S. policy, justifying intervention in Latin American affairs. Kind of relevant a little bit today, I think. Originally a statement of anti-colonial intent, the Monroe Doctrine later became a tool of U.S. hemispheric dominance. I'd be doing that's a little bit of a kind of right on the nose right now, isn't it? And, of course, I'd be doing a disservice if we didn't stop and take a step back and address some cognitive dissonance in the room. That cognitive dissonance is that this coin design and the status of African Americans in the United States. As we've discussed previously, this coin is literally dripping in anti-slavery imagery. Liberty is quite literally holding the trappings of a freed slave. She's proudly proclaiming to the world, while I was once a slave, I am now the light of the world. And yet, while these coins bearing this design were coming off the dies, millions of Africans were held in bondage. Even more infuriating, when the CSA commissioned a true coin of their own, they kept the Liberty seated design, all while fighting a bloody war to keep their fellow man in the bondage of slavery. We should, since we're on the subject, talk about our national motto, as in this era we see a new development. Our national motto traditionally had been E pluribus unum, out of many, one. However, during the Civil War, when the country was gripped by fear, division, and uncertainty, public appeals to the Treasury Department urged that God be acknowledged on national coinage as a source of unity and moral strength. In response to this, Treasury Secretary Solomon P. Chase directed the director of the Mint to develop a motto reflecting the nation's faith. The phrase first appeared in 1864 on the 2-cent piece, marking the first official use of a religious motto on U.S. currency. The inclusion was not consistent, however. Design changes and evolving coinage priorities caused it to appear and disappear on certain denominations. Still, its use grew alongside a rising sense of national identity tied to religious values, eventually paving the way for broader adoption. The motto became deeply embedded in American numismatic and cultural tradition well before being declared the official national motto in 1956 at the height of the Red Scare. Look, more context for you all. Manifest Destiny. So, the Oregon Trail was a 2,100-mile long east-west large-wheeled wagon route and immigrant trail in North America that connected the Missouri River to valleys in the Oregon Territory. The eastern part of the Oregon Trail crossed what is now the states of Kansas, Nebraska, and Wyoming. The western half crossed the current states of Idaho and Oregon. The Oregon Trail was laid by fur traders and trappers from about 1811 to 1840 and was initially only passable on foot or horseback. By 1836, when the first migrant wagon train was organized in Independence, Missouri, a wagon trail had been cleared to Fort Hall, Idaho. Wagon trails were cleared increasingly further west and eventually reached the Willamette Valley in Oregon. The Oregon Trail and its many offshoots were used by about 400,000 settlers, farmers, miners, ranchers, and business owners, plus their families, to get to the area known as Oregon and its surroundings, with traffic especially thick from 1846 to 1869. The eastern half of the trail was also used by travelers on the California Trail, the Mormon Trail, and the Bozeman Trail, before turning off into their separate destinations. Manifest Destiny was the belief that the United States was destined to expand its dominion and spread democracy and capitalism across the North American continent. Even while this network of trails taking settlers to the Wild West, the idea of the Romantic West was still very much alive and well in the popular zeitgeist. And as America goes, so does her coinage. Let's examine the first coin to truly embody that Western spirit. The Indian Cent and Manifest Destiny. The Indian Cent is actually a misnomer. Rather than being an actual Native American, we have a disguised liberty. Examine the features and you'll find they are European, not Native. An old but false legend says Longacre sketched his daughter Sarah playing in the yard with a war bonnet and made this his model. This legend is untrue, as Longacre himself in some documentation said that he based the design on the statue Crouching Venus. Now, I want you to just think about the symbolism for a minute. We have a white European liberty in the guise of a Native American. How do you 150 years later take that message? Is it an homage to the proud and strong indigenous inhabitants of North America? Is it a symbol of colonialism? Before you answer, I think we should let Longacre himself speak. Quote, "From the copper shores of Lake Superior to the silver mountains of Posti and the Ojibwa," and I'm not going to pronounce any of these names correctly, even though I am native, the feathered tiara is a characteristic of the primitive races of our hemisphere. as is the turban for the Asiatic. Nor is there anything in its decorative character repulsive to the association of liberty. It is more appropriate than the Phrygian cap, the emblem rather of the emancipated slave than of the independent freeman, of those who were able to say we were never in bondage to any man. I regard, then, this emblem of America as a proper and well-defined portion of our national inheritance, and having now the opportunity of consecrating it as a memorial of liberty. Our liberty. American liberty. Why not use it? One more graceful can scarcely be devised. We have only determined that it shall be appropriate, and the world outside of us cannot wrest it from us. So, I find it terribly interesting that Longacre admits that the quote feathered tiara isn't a traditional symbol of liberty, but it is uniquely American, and it's not antithetical to liberty. In fact, he makes the argument that since Americans of this age had never been in bondage, save the millions of Africans in bondage, that this symbol is more appropriate for American values. He freely admits that he is taking the symbol from the, quote, primitive races to create a uniquely American symbol of liberty. Knowing the designer's intentions, or knowing the designer's thoughts now, does this change your answer to that original question? So, we're going to move on to the 1870s and what I like to call soft force projection in this era. I can't give the trade dollar the history it deserves in this talk, so to be brief, trade dollars were produced to circulate in the Far East. The Mexican 8 real and the Spanish milled dollar before it were the preferred coin of the Eastern merchants. In 1866, the Mexican 8 real coin had a design change due to a new empire being declared by an Austrian noble. This caused widespread non-acceptance of the new coin in Asia. Seeing an opportunity to export American silver, the trade dollar was conceived. The obverse depicts Miss Liberty seated on a bale of merchandise, her right hand holding a branch, her left hand holding a ribbon inscribed Liberty. A sheaf of wheat behind, and the sea in the front. In God We Trust appears at the bottom, just above the date. Stars surround the upper portion. The reverse depicts an eagle holding 3 arrows in a branch, with E pluribus unum on a ribbon above. What we see on this design of this coin truly is soft force projection. The fact that American coinage was widely accepted for at least a decade or so in the Far East is force projection all on its own, but the design itself highlights the industrial might of the US as well as the agricultural bounty of our nation, all in the lead up to the American century. The Grand Old West. So, by the first decade of the 20th century, the West truly was one. Most tribal peoples had been forced onto reservations or assimilated into American society. While the West was won by the 20th century, the memory of the untamed wilderness, manifest destiny, and the quote, Red Indian were very much alive. There exist 3 contemporary coins from this time that actually do depict a real Native American, not liberty masquerading in a headdress. The $2.50 and $5 Indian gold coins, and the Buffalo nickel. Bella Lyon Pratt was given the task of executing a design for the quarter and half eagle after Augustus St. Gaudens died without completing his designs. Pratt's design is not one person, but appears to be a composite. Regardless, this actually is a Native American appearing on U.S. coinage for the first time. James Earl Fraser would design the Buffalo nickel in 1912 and 1913, answering the same call to beautify American coinage. Fraser used a number of Native American models, and some controversy still exists on exactly who is on the obverse. But frankly, it should be looked at as a composite. We can say for sure at least that we know who the buffalo is. The buffalo is Black Diamond, an American bison kept at the Bronx Zoo. That was quite popular at the time. Rather than try myself to opine what the design of an American Indian and bison means, I think we should just listen to James Earl Fraser's own words himself. And this is a quote. When I was asked to do a nickel, I felt I wanted to do something totally American, a coin that could not be mistaken for any other country's coin. It occurred to me that the Buffalo nickel, as part of our Western background, was 100% American, and that our North American Indian fitted into that picture nicely. I find it quite interesting that while Fraser paid homage to the Plains Indian, his first thought of a uniquely American element was the North American bison, and the Indian just happens to fit his theme. So I ask you, with 100 years of hindsight, was this a loving homage to our nation's indigenous inhabitants? Is it just convenient window dressing? Does the intent of the design matter when many Native Americans today celebrate it? The American Renaissance of American coinage. So, in 1916, a true Renaissance of American coinage was undertaken. The Barber designs of 1892 were officially 25 years old, and really not a favorite of the Treasury Department or most people. Section 3510 of the revised statute passed in 1890 states, quote, "No design in the change or die of any coin shall be made oftener than once in 25 years, unless authorized by Congress." This carve-out opened the door to what many consider the three greatest designs in U.S. coinage history. The Mercury dime, the Mercury dime and Walking Liberty half were both executed by Adolph Weinman, a student of Augustus St. Gaudens and an incredible sculptor in his own right. His Mercury design actually features the goddess of liberty wearing a winged cap to symbolize freedom of thought. Mercury is actually the male messenger god of the Romans, and this is clearly a woman. His Walking Liberty design bears a full-length figure of liberty, the folds of the stars and stripes, flying to the breeze as a background, progressing in a full stride toward the dawn of a new day, carrying branches of laurel and oak, symbolizing Lord, symbolical of civil and military glory. The hand of the figure is outstretched in bestowal of the spirit of liberty. It's a lot of symbolism, but if we remember that in 1916 the United States was still firmly isolationist as the horrors of World War I raged in Europe, these designs send a powerful message. The United States rejects authoritarianism and affirms her commitment to freedom of thought and expression. The Standing Liberty Quarter of Herman McNeil features Liberty standing through a gate in a wall. She clutches two objects in her hands, a shield and an olive branch. The symbolism is easy to grasp. The United States desires peace, but will not shrink from her own defense. Art historian Cornelius Vermeulen has this to say about the design. Liberty is presented as the Athena of the Parthenon, pediments a powerful woman striding forward, and states that, but for the stars and stripes on her shield, everything about this Amazon calls to mind Greek sculpture of the period of 450 to 350 BC. And honestly, what a wonderful quote to be able to bookend this discussion. Think back to that Athenian owl at the beginning of our talk. Even thousands of years later, Herman McNeil used the same formula to convey values on coinage, even going so far as to directly use Greek imagery in his American coin design. And unfortunately, after the end of the Walking Liberty half dollar in 1947, Liberty would never again grace our circulating coinage. Quick spoiler here in a few minutes. Now, while I hold no resentment to honoring our nation's great leaders on coinage, I can't help but feel we've lost something uniquely American. Thankfully, a new renaissance has been happening quietly. Beginning in 2015 and wrapping in 2023, the U.S. Mint produced the American Liberty High Relief series that had several standouts, including a most handsome depiction of a Liberty tree, a bucking bronco, and for the first time, the Goddess of Liberty as an African American woman. In 2026, for the semi-quincentennial, new designs will be struck to celebrate 250 years of American independence. And I, for one, am filled with hope that once again, Americans will glance at their pocket change and be reminded of our shared history, our triumphs, our tribulations, and most importantly, our shared American values. And that, my friends, is all I have for you on that subject.
Thank you very much. That was amazing as usual.
Sorry for the frog in my throat, everybody. It was a little rough.
I mean, you can't help that. Sometimes we just have one of those days.
Oh, yes.
So if anybody does have any questions, if you can pop those in that Q&A button at the bottom or on your screen, maybe I will do the wrap up and then we'll come back and see if there's any questions. That works for you?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you again, Russ, for a great presentation. Our NumismaTalks are being recorded and will be available once they're edited, and that does take a bit of time. So in case anybody's looking for it, give it a few weeks. Please be sure to check for future programs on our website at bunny.org under the Education tab. All righty. Looks like we've got a couple things pop up. Oh, Elliot says, "Hi, Russ. Looking forward to the presentation." Lots of positives. Great presentation. Very nice. What are your thoughts regarding the eagle on the 2026 dime?
I think it's fairly interesting. It seems to be more I like the fact that it seems to be more alive instead of stationary. I know some people aren't quite crazy about it because it looks a little scrawny. I've heard some other things. But I do like that rather than reaching back just to classic things, especially with the Mint's Artist Infusion program, they're really kind of pushing limits on what coins can be and what artistry can be on coins. So personally, I'm a big fan of it. I know that's not for everybody though.
Okay. Another praise of excellent presentation. How did interpretations of liberty change between different mint engravers?
Yeah, so I mean, you can really look at even, just looking at Henry Voigt and his, very quick, his best attempt, right? And then you can go all the way to like Christian Gobrecht, who he's the first one that really, with the steam press and with this new technology, he basically realizes that with this new technology, he is able to do something different rather than just a bust or just a face. He is able to capture liberty in all of her glory, not just in profile, but in completeness. And I think that you see those different things evolve. You can even look at going from Morgan to Barber. If you look at the Morgan dollar compared to say the Barber half dollar, they look very, very similar. So I think a lot of it has to do with the education, depending on the classical education the designer or the engraver went through, and honestly just their own tastes. And that's kind of what's interesting, because again, none of these coinage laws really ever gave a exact what they had to do. There were gates they had to meet, and then they could do whatever they want with it. So some of them went and really ran with it and did amazing things. Others, not so much.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the reverse of the 2026 dime only holding arrows and no olive branch?
Yeah, that is another one that is interesting. I'm not the biggest fan. I would much prefer the classic imagery of the olive branch. I wonder though how much, and this is why I feel like talking about these kind of things are really important. To the average person, they're not going to notice that. People like us, we notice that, and we say, wait a minute, what is that trying to say? Is that trying to say something, or is that just an omission? So I think it's something that really should have been addressed, and I'm actually kind of shocked that it wasn't, to be very honest.
Got a lot of discussion about the 2026 dime.
Yes.
Can you please cover the symbolism on the 2026 dime?
Yeah, so I mean, the symbolism on the 2026 dime is very, very classical American. You look, on the obverse, you have the goddess of liberty on the obverse, and not only is she wearing a Phrygian cap, she's actually wearing a Phrygian cap with the stars and stripes on it. So it is quite literally, it's a pelisse with the stars and stripes on it. I don't know how you can get more American or more classical symbolism than that. Her hair being unbound is also something that I think should be paid attention to. That again goes back to, the whole freedom of thought, freedom of expression thing that we saw much maligned at some point in history and then, much more on the forefront. And then of course, the reverse symbolism is, a fairly martial looking eagle holding some arrows. So yeah, that is kind of an interesting symbolism there. We have one side essentially that is very classically American liberty, and then we have one side that almost would almost is a little jingoistic, a little almost a little braggartly, I would say.
Okay. Another compliment of thank you very much. Um, Russ, very interesting and informative lecture. How long did it take to put this presentation together? Thank you both.
Oh, yeah. This is actually something I've been playing with for quite a while. This is actually I did another talk about liberty and about liberty and some more of the that symbolism things, and this is an outgrowth of that. This is a topic that I'm really really passionate about. So this has been, to be really honest, probably a couple years worth of different research, putting things together, talking about one part of it, and then kind of collating it all into this particular one. But to be really honest, I have a whole lot more to say on this that I'm going to be working on. So,
Good. Okay. How does liberty on coins differ from liberty on paper money?
yeah, so that's actually kind of the really interesting part. With a lot of paper money, and especially with modern paper money, I would say, everything that was made, after the quote unquote horse blanket era, um, liberty doesn't really factor into any of it. You don't see liberty anywhere. You see presidents, you see politicians. Um, but, before that, we did have very beautiful paper money. And we did have things like the educational series of notes. The $1 has Columbia literally reclining on on a bed pointing to the new capital.
Hmm.
So at one point, our paper money was just as beautiful as our coinage. But that's kind of the interesting part is, to some people, paper money isn't really paper money. It's fiat. It's a piece of paper. So do you need as much symbolism with that? I argue yes, but some people would argue no.
Okay, I may have missed this, but what was the significance and necessity for the eagle on specific denominations?
Yeah, so essentially what the law said was that there had to be an eagle on anything made out of silver or gold. And I think this is really more because silver and gold were money. That's specie. Copper is not. Copper is a way to make small change. Um, what you have to remember, especially during the early, really until the 1930s, our monetary system was based on the content of metal in the coin. So, for example, $20 gold piece is 0.96 of an ounce of gold. Gold was pegged at $20 an ounce by the federal government until 1933. So your $20 gold piece had close to $20 of gold into it. Same with silver, same with all the silver and all those things. So really, essentially, the law was the eagle has to be on the coinage of specie, not so much on the more minor coinage, your copper coinage. So that is essentially why.
What cultural movements caused liberty to be replaced by historical figures?
That is actually really interesting. And I think there's actually a ton more research that I really need to do, that I would love to do to find out exactly why we moved so far away. The first time we get a man on circulating coinage is the Lincoln cent. And that was a noble thing. We're going to put Lincoln to celebrate his 100th anniversary or his 100th birthday. He is one of our seminal figures. He preserved the Union, all these things. Wonderful idea. Love that. And then they just kept making them. Okay, I can deal with that. One coin, all right. Well, then you get to the other coins, right? Then you get to the Washington quarter. Oh, okay, the Washington quarter is going to go away. Or the Washington quarter now, 1932. He was born in 1732. You got to commemorate Washington. He's the pater familias. He is the father of our nation. Okay, I can get behind that. And I feel like it just kept being a slippery slope to essentially honor great men rather than honor great ideals. And I don't know if that is a move towards more of a more of the capitalistic, more of the again, this is such it's there's so much nuance there. I wonder how much of it was a move away or a move towards what we're seeing in a post World War I, post World War II world. Ideals don't necessarily resonate with people, but great men, great people do. And I think that's short-sighted. Again, I don't knock great men, great people being honored on coinage, but I think it's much more important to have good ideals and good unifying rallying cries than it is to honor someone, at least on circulating coinage.
Yeah. Um, this might be a follow-up to another question, and now
Mhm.
I don't remember what that one was, and I deleted it. Is there a connection to the ideal of liberty? Not
Mm.
sure what that was in relationship. If you want to pop that back in, so we know what the connection is, I apologize. Um, the 1932 Washington Quarter was supposed to be a one-year issue. Why didn't they revert back to liberty in 1933?
It's a very good question. I don't have a good source for you, to be very honest, but I would imagine that frankly, it's the Great Depression. And can the federal government really care about designing a new coin when Americans are standing in breadlines? I think it was just much more a practicality issue than maybe necessarily a something that was done with malice. But again, it sets a precedent, right? If you can do it for these ones, you can do it for all the other ones.
Um, what went into the thinking of reissuing the 1916 100 anniversary dime, quarter, and half again in 2026 as gold coins? Sorry.
That is a really good question. I am not the director of the Mint. I do not serve on the Citizens Coinage Advisory because I would have many questions for that. We've already done that in 2016. Um, they're lovely designs. Everybody loves them. I love them. But I don't know that we needed more gold from them. I really don't know what the thought was other than the Mint essentially, looking at a balance sheet and going, wow, we did pretty good with those last time. Might as well do them again.
Good. Another great talk and discussion. Many thanks. Here's the connection. So, do liberty and the eagle have a connection?
Ah, I don't know that they have as much of a concrete connection. The when they were discussing the national symbol of the United States, very famously, Benjamin Franklin suggested the North American turkey, which is not quite a noble animal. But the eagle, I think the eagle actually, to be really honest, I think it kind of comes back to um, I think it comes back to really the wilds of North America and even the Native American population. What you have to remember, especially with the founding fathers, they're settling in this wild and there's this majesty all around them and they're deists. So, they don't see God in everyday life. They see God in everything and what he put into motion. And I think, anybody that's ever actually seen an eagle fly or even seen an eagle hunt, it is a truly breathtaking thing. And it looks like a very, very noble animal. And it is, essentially an apex predator. So it kind of makes sense that if you want a symbol for your nation and you need an animal for it, you know, an eagle makes pretty good sense. We can also at the same time though, we can look at other cultures like Rome. Rome was very fond of the eagle. You even find it on Hellenistic coin designs. Um, Eagles have always been kind of present on coinage for different reasons.
Mhm.
But I think for the American side, I really think it's the wildness of this place.
Do you see the US Mint ever going back to purely classic styled coinage designs?
I do not. Unfortunately, look, I love the U.S. Mint. They have done tremendous things in the last decade, which I'm a big, big fan of. However, I don't know that they will ever. They're not coin people, right? And people, I say that to people, and they're like, "What are you talking about? What
Mhm.
do you mean the people that make the coins aren't coin people?" They're not coin people. They're not coin collectors. They're not numismatists. They don't think in those ways.
Mhm.
And what you also have to remember is that at one point, the mint had tremendous freedom. We quoted some laws earlier that if a design laps for 25 years, go for it. You can change it to whatever you want, U.S. Mint. If there's no legislation, be my guest. In our hyper bureaucratic world now, that can't happen. Could you imagine if Paul Hollis said, "Well, the Washington Corridor has been the same design, or the Jefferson Nickel has been the same design for 25 years. We're gonna go to something else." He'd be impeached. It all hell would break loose. So I think that a lot of our bureaucracy has really strangled um, a lot of expression in this, to be really honest. And this the Citizens Coinage Advisory does tremendous work in advising the mint, but at the end of the day, they can only advise. They can't make legislation and they can't make decisions.
As a hobby, do you think today's superhero mintages are attracting youngsters?
I don't know. I do think that there are definitely people that are buying them for the novelty. I know a few people that have bought some that have never really bought anything from the US Mint. Um, Personally, I get a little worried because I start feeling like we are becoming a little bit like the rest of the world's mints. I really don't want the US Mint to be the Pubjoy Mint, making random stuff. Um, but at the same time, numismatics is a hobby that, if we are not good stewards of it, is going to die. Um, Coins, I don't know that coins are very long for this world, to be very honest. 20 years, 30 years, maybe? They're gonna go away at some point. And so if we don't make enough collectors now, I hope I have a job in 30 years.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where I'm at with it, to be really honest. I think it's a good thing. I think it gets people involved. I just hope they don't overdo it.
I will say I heard you did a great job with the YNA's meeting the other day.
Thank you.
Yep. Another question. Do you think the US Mint's modern day rarities will retain their values?
So, with most of modern US Mint products, you'll find that they don't generally hold a lot of their value. There are exceptions. The Privy Mark stuff that was pretty limited, things like that. Those will hold their value. The problem with a lot of these offerings with the mint, and I say it's a problem, but it's only a problem to people like me and people that are looking to make money. The problem is that the releases aren't really limited. You can subscribe to them, which is wonderful because everybody that wants one gets one. The problem is on the back end, the resales. In years past, there's been a lot of people that buy multiple quantities to try to flip. And a lot of those guys get burned. To be really honest, I probably have 150 Morgan and Peace dollars from 2024 and 2025 I can't sell because I was like, surely people are going to be into these. So I bought a bunch from a distributor, and you know what? I haven't sold hardly any of them. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of the give and take with that. So what I tell people, especially with coins, with true numismatic coins, they're not an investment. It's a hobby. Don't think of them as an investment because collectibles markets change. Now, if you want to buy an ounce of gold and you're willing to pay a decent premium to own that ounce of gold and have something really pretty to look at and enjoy, buy it, love it, absolutely. But don't buy it expecting to get a big return. It's too dicey.
Hmm. Add on, I think, to that last question, example, the 2000 W dollars and the
Yep,
2025 Omega cents.
yep, yeah. So those again, the Omega sets that's going to be an interesting one in the market to see how those shake out. Because those went for a lot of money. So who knows, to be really honest.
To your earlier point of coin longevity, reducing production on pennies must have an effect on the need for three active mints for circulating coins.
You would imagine so. I don't know that. I really don't know what's going to happen with it, honestly. Yes, with them not striking circulation pennies anymore, but that's kind of the other thing you have to think of too, is that they're not striking cents for circulation, but each mint will still be striking cents. They will still be included in mint sets, so Philadelphia and Denver will still strike them. And of course, they'll be in proof sets, so San Francisco will strike them. So I think that actually by getting rid of the production in that large a quantity of cents, I think that actually might help with everything else. So quarters and nickels, especially quarters, nickels, and dimes, they should be able to produce more now that they don't have that run that they have to worry about in Lincoln cents.
Um, okay, that looks like we got to the end of the questions. So I
All
just want to
right.
say thank you again very much. Oh, I got another one popped up here. Maybe out of the scope, but can you discuss how rising bullion, I always say that wrong, cost over time could impact the US Mint's production of collector coins?
Yeah. So I don't know that rising bullion costs will really affect the mint per se. The mint will still get its stocks of blanks and things like that for the most part, because they have very specific contracts. And what you have to remember about our bullion coins, especially, is that the legislation is very narrow and very clear. Gold has to be mined in the U.S., has to be refined in the U.S., the blanks have to be made in the U.S.
Mhm.
There's only a couple distributors that do this. Um, no one ever wants to give up a government contract. You just don't do it. So you may see more of a squeeze in the bullion side, like for say like 1 ounce rounds, 1 ounce bars, things like that, because certain distributors are trying to meet the demand of the mint. But I don't really think the mint will ever have much of a problem being able to source, essentially for their bullion coins.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for all the questions that everybody tossed out. That was great discussion. And thank you, Russ. And you guys have a great day.
Absolutely. See you guys.